Hello, all you fantasy and sci-fi nerds. Welcome back to another episode of Tea and Tolkien Thursdays, your go-to podcast for nerdy crossovers, deep dives, and, of course, tea. I'm Susie Speckles, also known in some circles as Snarky Susie, and I'll be your resident sass provider today. And along with my resident co-hosts Tierra McGuire, Kerrie Chang, and Humphrey Goldstein, I will be discussing the topic of Star Trek and how it might have been influenced by The Lord of the Rings. We'll be exploring the similarities in their themes, character archetypes, and overarching narratives. So grab a cup of your favorite brew, sit back, and get ready for a deep dive.
And I'm Tierra McGuire, your Tolkien lore obsessive. Basically, if you're talking about elves, dwarves, or the obscure history of Middle-earth, I'll nerd out so hard you'll need protective eyewear. Today, I'll be sharing my insights on the thematic parallels between Tolkien's legendary world and the Star Trek universe. I'm particularly excited to dive into the ethical and philosophical questions that both stories explore, from the morality of technology to the importance of fellowship.
Kerrie Chang here. I live in the glorious intersection of literature and media studies, which basically means I overanalyze everything you love, but, in a fun way. I'll be bringing my critical lens to our discussion today, dissecting the narrative structures and character development in both The Lord of the Rings and Star Trek. My goal is to uncover the storytelling techniques that make these two sagas so enduring and influential.
And I'm Humphrey Goldstein, your Tolkien history and pop culture guy. If you need context about how something stayed relevant for decades, or survived a cultural revolution, I'm your human Wikipedia. I'll be exploring the cultural impact of both The Lord of the Rings and Star Trek, and how they've each carved out a unique and lasting place in our collective imagination. I'll also be highlighting the historical moments that influenced their creation and reception, showing how these stories reflect the eras they were born in.
Perfect, team. Today, we're diving into something I know will cause at least mild fan wars: how Star Trek, yes, that 59-year-old space opera that somehow survived every sci-fi fad, was influenced by The Lord of the Rings. And, yes, folks, they were coexisting in weird ways, because Tolkien's books and Star Trek's original series overlapped in the mid-60s. We'll be exploring how both franchises delve into themes of good versus evil, the weight of a quest, and the importance of a fellowship. We'll also be looking at the character archetypes, from the wise, old mentor to the steadfast hero, to see how these stories, one set in space and the other in a fantasy realm, share a surprising amount of DNA.
Right, so the first thing to clarify is that Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy was published in stages between 1954 and 1955 in the UK, and the US editions followed closely. Meanwhile, Star Trek, the original series, premiered in 1966. So there's this fascinating overlap where science fiction on TV and high fantasy literature were both exploding in popularity. This means many of the original Star Trek writers and creators were already immersed in Middle-earth's world. They were boldly going where many readers had gone before. It's a Trek KY but true story.
And even thematically, you can see Tolkien's fingerprints in Gene Roddenberry's vision. Take the idea of a fellowship, a diverse group on a mission, encountering challenges, moral dilemmas, and philosophical questions. That's basically the Enterprise crew. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, that's the spacefaring fellowship. The way they navigate their moral compass while encountering strange new worlds is a direct echo of the challenges faced by Frodo and his companions. In fact, a little-known fact is that the iconic Vulcan salute was inspired by a Jewish priestly blessing. This shared DNA of diverse groups on a grand mission is what makes both stories so resonant.
Totally. And don't forget the quest structure. The Lord of the Rings is obviously a literal quest, but Star Trek episodes often revolve around a moral, exploratory, or diplomatic quest. And Roddenberry was very deliberate about incorporating those mythic storytelling principles. You know, the hero's journey archetype that Tolkien leaned on so heavily. This structural parallel, where a small group is on a mission of immense importance, is a foundational element in both franchises. An interesting fact about Tolkien is that he didn't invent the word dwarf. He adopted it from Old Norse, but he intentionally changed the plural from dwarfs to dwarves to reflect their unique mythical nature within his work. This attention to detail shows his commitment to world building.
I mean, look at Spock. Logical, alien, trying to understand humans but also caught in ethical dilemmas. That's basically Gandalf light, in space, with pointy ears. Both characters serve as the wise mentor figure, guiding the human protagonists on their journeys. Gandalf's deep knowledge of Middle-earth's history and magic is mirrored in Spock's mastery of science and Vulcan philosophy. They are both voices of reason who must often contend with the emotional impulses of their companions, while also secretly grappling with their own moral compass.
I mean, come on, Susie. Gandalf had a beard, Spock had a sideburn situation, but yes, they are both guiding figures for their respective fellowships. And then you have Kirk, who's your classic Aragorn, a charismatic, somewhat morally flexible leader who's still heroic. Both are driven by a sense of duty and a need to protect their people, often making difficult choices for the greater good. Just as Aragorn unites the races of Middle-earth, Kirk brings together the diverse crew of the Enterprise, proving that even a roguish approach can save the day. This parallel between a king-in-waiting and a starship captain is a testament to the enduring power of the hero archetype.
There's also the moral stakes. Tolkien wasn't shy about the corruption of power, the lure of greed, and the danger of hubris. Star Trek borrowed heavily from that, especially in episodes dealing with omnipotent beings or dangerous artifacts. The Kobayashi Maru test? That's basically a narrative about testing moral fiber, just like Frodo carrying the ring. Both scenarios force the protagonist to face an unwinnable situation, pushing them to their ethical limits and revealing their true character. The journey isn't about victory, it's about the struggle and the choices made along the way. Both franchises teach us that integrity and sacrifice are far more valuable than a simple win.
Right, and let's not overlook world building. Tolkien invented languages, histories, and a full cosmology for Middle-earth. Roddenberry and the Star Trek team didn't go to the same depth linguistically, but they created political structures, alien cultures, and philosophical backdrops that made the Star Trek universe feel similarly lived in. Each alien species, from the Klingon to the Vulcans, has its own unique customs and history that inform their interactions. Much like the distinct realms of elves and dwarves, these diverse cultures add layers of richness and complexity to the overall narrative, making the universe feel vast and authentic.
And yet, somehow, Star Trek has stayed relevant for 59 years. You can argue Tolkien's work has done the same, but Star Trek has been rebooted, remade, and repurposed across multiple generations, platforms, and even fandom subcultures. While Tolkien's books are a timeless, foundational text for fantasy, Star Trek's ability to evolve and comment on contemporary issues, from the Cold War to civil rights, has made it a continuous cultural touchstone. Its message of a hopeful, humanist future is a powerful lure that keeps new generations engaging with its core vision.
I think part of that is its adaptability. Tolkien's universe is static, a completed epic. Star Trek. It's modular. You can take the same premise, the exploration of new worlds and civilizations, and update it for new political, cultural, or technological contexts. This allows for an endless supply of new stories and perspectives. For instance, Star Trek, The Next Generation was able to explore post-Cold War diplomacy, while Star Trek, Discovery grapples with a more fractured, modern society. This adaptability has allowed the franchise to remain a relevant and hopeful vision of the future.
Plus, Star Trek tapped into what we might call aspirational futurism. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a vision of what humanity could be, diverse, cooperative, and scientifically curious. That kept it in the cultural conversation. Whereas Tolkien gave us a cautionary tale about power, Star Trek gave us hope about the future. It presented a world where humanity had overcome its petty squabbles, united to explore the cosmos, and embraced a future of peace and understanding. This optimistic worldview, so different from the darker, more mythic tone of Tolkien, is a key reason for its enduring appeal and relevance.
And there's also timing. The Cold War was happening, and Star Trek offered allegories about diplomacy, xenophobia, and ethics in a way that was more digestible than a textbook or political treatise. Tolkien, meanwhile, had already written about war, industrialization, and environmental degradation, but in a fantasy lens. This distinction in their approach to heavy topics is crucial. Star Trek's optimistic, forward-looking ethos provided a hopeful counter-narrative to the constant threat of nuclear annihilation, while Tolkien's work, though steeped in the horrors of war he experienced firsthand, offered a timeless mythology that resonated with a different kind of existential dread.
Okay, so let's talk a little meta for a second, the fans. Tolkien fans were obsessed with depth and canon. Star Trek fans were obsessed with continuity and logic. Both fandoms created a blueprint for what modern nerd culture looks like. Conventions, fanfiction, cosplay, you see the legacy everywhere. The dedication of these early fan communities, meticulously cataloging every detail and debating every plot point, paved the way for the rich, interactive fandoms we see today. They built a foundation of shared passion and collective creativity that continues to shape how we engage with our favorite stories.
Yes. And let's remember, the mid-60s also had a rising counterculture movement. Both Tolkien and Star Trek resonated because they offered an escape from reality but in very different ways, one into high fantasy, one into speculative futurism. Tolkien's work became a symbol of a rejection of industrialization and war, a return to a simpler, more natural world. Star Trek, meanwhile, offered a future free from those same conflicts, where humanity had evolved beyond its tribal squabbles and embraced a collective, hopeful destiny among the stars. They were two sides of the same coin, a yearning for a better, more meaningful existence.
And yet, they are not mutually exclusive. Star Trek even references Tolkien-esque concepts. Think of the elves as an analogy for advanced civilizations, or the hobbit-like underdogs who make a difference. Episodes like The City on the Edge of Forever, or The Trouble with Tribbles have mythic undertones in their storytelling. These aren't just one-off homages, they are part of a deeper shared narrative DNA that recognizes the power of timeless archetypes. The way both franchises explore destiny, sacrifice, and the enduring nature of good and evil proves that a story about a ringbearer and a story about a starship captain can exist in the same grand conversation about what it means to be heroic.
Exactly. And over the decades, Star Trek has adapted these mythic principles into science fiction. You've got series like Deep Space Nine and Discovery that explore political machinations, moral dilemmas, and epic journeys, Tolkien style, but in a futuristic context. Deep Space Nine in particular delves into the corrupting influence of power through characters like Gul Dukat, who's not unlike a twisted version of a Tolkien villain, driven by ambition and a warped sense of honor. Similarly, Discovery explores the weight of destiny and the fellowship of a crew trying to save a fractured universe, echoing the long and arduous quest to defeat Sauron. The core tenets of good and evil remain, just wrapped in a different kind of armor.
So, in short, Tolkien laid down the blueprint for mythic storytelling in the 20th century, and Star Trek applied those principles to speculative science fiction. It's a marriage of fantasy sensibilities and futuristic optimism. While Tolkien looked back to ancient tales to craft a timeless epic, Star Trek looked ahead, using a similar narrative framework to imagine a hopeful future for humanity. The shared core of a small fellowship on a grand quest, facing moral tests and overwhelming odds, proves that the most powerful stories are those that resonate across genres and generations.
And now, almost 6 decades later, both remain culturally relevant. Tolkien's work exploded again thanks to Peter Jackson's films, and Star Trek has multiple shows, movies, and even online series keeping it alive for Gen Z and beyond. The consistent ability of these franchises to adapt and find new audiences speaks to their timeless appeal. Whether it's the classic struggle between good and evil, the bond of a found family, or the courage to face the unknown, the core themes resonate with every new generation. Both stories prove that the most enduring tales are the ones that remind us what it means to be human.
And let's not forget, both universes are ripe for analysis. People like us get paid, in nerd credibility, to make these connections. These deep, rich worlds are an endless well of topics for discussion, from the political structures of the Federation to the history of the First Age of Middle-earth. The ongoing fan debates, academic papers, and podcasts like ours are a testament to the enduring power and complexity of these fictional worlds. We could spend a whole year's worth of episodes just on one character arc.
And speaking of connections, I want to remind our listeners that if you love diving deep into fandoms, you should check out the Princess Toy Nerd YouTube channel. They do amazing content on everything from fantasy franchises to geek culture commentary, and it pairs nicely with this kind of discussion. You'll find them exploring the lore of different series, reviewing new content, and sharing their own fun takes on all things nerdy. It's a great place to continue the conversation after the podcast ends.
Yes. Seriously, go subscribe. Tell them Snarky Susie sent you. You won't regret it, unless you're allergic to high-quality nerd content, in which case, well, I can't help you there. The videos on the channel are a masterclass in dissecting fandoms with humor and insight, making even the most obscure lore accessible and entertaining. It's the perfect place to get your fix of deep dives, cultural analysis, and everything in between.
And if you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us keep exploring these crossover nerdy topics. Your feedback is like dilithium crystals for our podcast. It fuels our mission to boldly go where no podcaster has gone before. We read every single review, and it genuinely helps new listeners find us and join our fellowship.
And next week, we are tackling another crossover, Hobbits and Hyperdrives. Basically, how space travel and sci-fi can borrow from Tolkien's sense of scale, pacing, and tension. We'll be discussing how the arduous, long journey of the Fellowship mirrors the slow burn, high-stakes exploration found in shows like The Expanse or Battlestar Galactica, and how the seemingly impossible task of destroying the One Ring is a narrative blueprint for surviving the void of space.
That's right, and we might even have a live Q&A segment with listeners sending us their favorite parallels between fantasy and sci-fi. We love hearing from you, so get ready to send in your thoughts on everything from magical creatures in space to futuristic swords. It's going to be a fun, chaotic, and very nerdy discussion, and we can't wait to see what you come up with.
Perfect. All right, friends, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, whether you're saving Middle-earth or boldly going where no one has gone before, keep sipping that tea, keep nerding out, and keep exploring. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating connections between two of the greatest pop culture epics. We'll see you next week for Hobbits and Hyperdrives, and until then, live long and prosper.
Bye.